Welcome to the Profile Corner. In today's video we will be building this tenoning jig for the table saw. It has two fences mounted onto it right now. They won't both be used at the same time, so one of these fences will be removed, and if this fence gets removed, then more than likely this fence will be relocated back to here. This is configured to work with one of my 3 table saws, and this mounts over the top of the rip fence, and it will allow the board to be guided through the saw blade in a fashion that will allow tenons to be cut. This jig will be used in our next video for mortise and tenons to cut the tenons, and so let's take a look at the build video now. I'll cut this board 16 by 16. The initial cut here will actually be at 17 inches, so I can square up this edge later on. Okay, now I need to decide which side is going to be the face side, and I think I'll make this side the face side, since this has a blemish in it. Okay, so now I need to lay out a grid on here, and I can take this over to the dado saw and make some 3/8 inch dado cuts in both directions here so that I can attach stops and clamps to this board. And I have the grid laid out here. What I did was I marked out 8 inches all around and made that the center, and then from there I marked out 3 inches in each direction to create a 3x3 grid. And what I'll be doing is I'll be using this Matchfit Dovetail Clamp Pro system, which I use on the pantry router also, and I'll be using this little device here to set up for the dovetail bit after I cut the dados using a dado stack. I will be doing it using a dado stack rather than using this router bit that it comes with that cuts a clearance for the dovetail bit. So I'll need to set the depth of cut to 11/32 over at the dado saw with a dado stack. I've used a 1/16 inch wide chipper along with the 2 outside blades to create a dado stack that's 5/16 inch wide. That seems to be the size that's required by the Matchfit system. And then I've set the height of the dado stack to match the height indicated here, 11/32, using the height setup block. I have the fence set so that the center of the dado stack is 8 inches from the fence. And I have a magnetic switch featherboard over here on the side that I'll be using to retain the width of the last cut so that I can use a 1, 2, 3 block to step over exactly 3 inches. Okay, so we're ready to get started here. Now we're ready to step over. Here's where we're at so far. Now I've got to be careful that I don't have my hand too far over here on the side because the blade will be exiting back here. Grid so far. Now we're ready to go to the router with the dovetail bit. I can't cut these dovetails over at the router table because I'm not able to hit these slots right here. So I'll just use a portable router with a fence mounted onto it that should allow me to move it into position here. So I'll be doing this outside groove first. I have used a 3/8" setup block to set the height of the bit, and then I set the center of the bit to be 2 inches from the fence, and using a ruler here, just like this, and I couldn't easily measure where the center of the bit is at, so I actually measured to the center of these 2 holes right here, and I'm getting 2 inches to the center. And so this should be a good setting that I can use to go all the way around. And of course, with the clamps that I've got here on the table to hold it down, I'll have to actually release those clamps after I make this cut. And when I'm making the cut, I want to start back here and then move forward toward the camera so that the fence is drawn into the edge of the board. And I need to hook up my dust collection to this router. First slot's been cut. Okay, so now I'll need to move the fence over so that I can make the next cut. And the next cut should be 5 inches from the center of the bit. So go 5 inches to the center of the screws. Okay, so we've made 2 passes all the way around now, and now we just need to pick up the center grooves. Okay, we need to go 8 inches to the center of the bit. Okay, so I actually went 7 inches to the center of the bit. I'm just going to continue that all the way across, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up the 8 inches from the center of the bit. Our grid is complete. I get a couple Matchfit devices and put them down into the groove so that we can take a look at what it's going to look like. Okay, when we need to clamp down a board, we just insert squeeze clamps like these into the dovetails. And those lock down nicely. And then when we need to secure the fence, we can insert smaller dovetail components into the slot, and then we can put a washer on top of the fence board, and then on top of that we can have our twist knob. Okay, so now we need to mount this onto the rip fence, so we'll have to build an assembly for that. I will be creating 2 replaceable fences for this jig. One of the fences measures 16 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. I'll be putting in a 3/16 inch hole roughly 4 inches down and 3/4 inch over from the side, and also roughly 4 inches from the bottom and 3/4 inches across, and that'll allow this fence to sit right there using this hardware that'll go into the slot, and then we'll be able to secure that with these types of handles on top. The other fence measures 2 inches across, and we'll also have a hole that's 4 inches down and 4 inches up from the bottom, and of course it'll be over 1 inch instead of 3/4 inch, and once again that'll be a 3/16 inch hole to allow this to go through. And then there's another fence that'll attach onto the front, and this will be the replaceable part for 0 clearance, and that'll sit in there just like that, and it'll be attached with screws on this other side here, and that way this piece will be replaceable. once the zero clearance stops working for us to limit the amount of chip out that we get. So that'll sit in there just about like that. So I'm going to head over to the drill press right now and drill out these 4 holes. I'll be setting up a fence again because I need to make sure that the distance that this hole is from this edge matches exactly the distance from this hole to this edge, and likewise here, so that the slot that's back here may be used for proper 90-degree alignment of the fence. While I'm at the drill press, I'll drill out holes for the screws every 2 inches along the edge here. And I've got it marked right here, 3/8 of an inch from this back edge, so that way it'll be right in the center of a 3/4 inch board that gets connected into this. I've just got some small screws that I've had for a couple years sitting around here. And so here I'm just going to drill down far enough so that the drill bit will make it all the way through, and then I'll drill the hole out again once I get this board attached to the other board so that I can get a proper countersink on the screw head. Okay, the jig is just sitting on the table saw. I have not yet attached it to the rip fence. We'll be taking a look at that in just a moment. I want to show you that when the larger fence is in this position, that would be used just like this. This board would be clamped down, and then that would be used to put the shoulder cut into the tenon. And then this is a smaller fence. This would actually be positioned back here when it's in use. And what that would be used for is to allow a board to be placed on just like this, and that would be for cutting this shoulder here. And then once that gets cut, the board can be flipped over and the shoulder can be cut on the opposite side for the tenon. Okay, so let's take a look at the back side of this jig to see how we're going to mount it to the rip fence. Your rip fence will likely be different from the way this rip fence is configured. This is a third-party fence arm on a Delta Unifence. And so what I did, I cut a board 2 inches wide, and then on the back side here, I have a board that is glued onto it that's 3/8 of an inch thick and 3/4 of an inch wide. And what that'll allow me to do is place the board right in here, and it should ride tight up against there. Unfortunately, this plywood is slightly warped, and so I'll be using screws to draw that back to where this board is at. And then we'll be waxing this surface in here so that it glides smoothly on this surface, as well as back here will get waxed so that it rides smoothly against the rip fence. So I need to drill some holes for screws to go through the other side and into this board to connect it so that this will be attached to the rip fence and move just like that on the rip fence. I drilled a hole 3 3/8 inch high from the bottom down here over at the drill press in the center of each one of these squares. And I use the fence on the drill press to make sure that they're all exactly the same. And that measurement, 3 3/8, will allow the board on the back side to receive the screw right in the center of the board. And since these were pre-drilled over at the drill press, they should be drilled straight. I'm drilling out the holes one at a time because I need to take out a curvature of this plywood by screwing it into the other side. And so I've already secured the first screw, getting ready to secure the second screw. Okay, we'll be putting this jig to use in the next video for cutting tenons. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.